Greetings, lore seekers, and welcome back to another episode of the Lost Archives. More Star Wars Legends lore. So today we're discussing the Reek, a creature that is rhino-esque from the planet Elysia. The Y is silent in that name, with various subspecies that could also be found on Iridonia and Kashyyyk, and I believe Ifor as well. The creature itself would be around 2.24 metres, 404 metres in length, and weigh approximately 1,100 kilograms at full adult size. Its skin colour would depend mostly on its diet, if it was fed specific things, but would usually consist of a brownish colour, and is made quite evident from the pictures you can see there. They have 3 horns, one large main horn that's used for ramming, and 2 secondary horns that could be used in the process of mauling and charging, for which to mince up their opponents, or interlock with other Reeks and wrestle. More on that later. But the Reeks themselves were usually pack animals in nature, and were actually herbivores, that's right, herbivores, and were quite placid creatures, quite calm, quite gentle. They could be provoked to be quite nasty, and this usually would be if you were to threaten the protection of the herd. And if you were to intrude upon the herd, you'd end up getting attacked quite violently with the horns. Now, they would mostly reside in mossy grasslands, where they'd continually feed on plant matter in these grasslands. So you're probably thinking, then why do the Geonosians use them as execution creatures? Well, exported Reeks, depending on what diet is available to them, will change based on the characteristics of their diet. So, for example, if you feed a Reek meat, it will take a more crimson hue on its skin colour, and it will become much more aggressive, meeting the demands of its Geonosian taskmasters. This means it can then be used in executions or exhibition-type sports, including blood sports. Now, the problem with this method is they can't actually survive off the meat, so to supplement this they are still given a plant-based meal, but only just enough to keep them healthy enough to fight and continue on. And I'll technically classify that as the Geonosian subvariant of the species, though they wouldn't technically be a subspecies, as this was only done on a case-by-case basis. Now, Reeks were imported off-world because they would then adapt to those worlds, and they'd be very useful to raise farms of Reeks. Though it would have to be in a way that reduced some of their aggressive behaviours to intruders. Granted, if you weren't someone who was known to them, they would still, give you the horns. One such group were the Zabrak, who are a indigenous species of the planet Iridonia. Now, what they would do is they would see the Reeks as prime candidates for war mounts, so they would export them off Elysia and bring them to Iridonia to train them as war mounts. Now, they didn't feed them a meat-rich diet like the Geonosians did. They would feed them plant matter to basically keep them fierce and strong, and as sources quote, with natural vigour. This also had the effect of turning the Reek's skin grey as they adapted to Iridonia. This also meant that their skin could now resist sharp and blunt weaponry during battle, and for some reason their horns were made much more sharper and longer than those of other Reeks. Though I do think this is perhaps a side effect of the Iridonians encouraging the Reeks to fight for mates. Now, the main reason for this was so that they could make them less likely to buck or bolt in a battle. This was basically so that they could be more effective war mounts, but I also think this is, the sparring with their horns increase the size and sharpness of them. The Iridonians also added tattoos to the Reeks in order to signify the tattoos they were with, because the vast majority of the Zabraks have a tattoo somewhere on their body. Now, eventually, the Zabrak species did develop cheaper and more effective ways of producing speeders, which meant there was a decline in the need for war mounts. However, the war mount style was still taught in most of the Iridonian military schools, even to the events of the Galactic Civil War. Now, the story didn't end there for the Reeks. They simply didn't just import them off-world or try and get rid of them or slaughter them. They actually released them into the wilds of the Iridonian world. They managed to thrive and adapt to this ecosystem without causing much damage to it, as is the case with sometimes when you bring a new creature into an ecosystem, it can have massive repercussions for the world's ecosystem. Thankfully that was not the case, and this actually does lead me on to the next bit. The Iridonians would sell one of the Reeks to the Ichor, or the Ephorians as they're known. These Reeks had yellow skin, which usually is attributed to their diet of the yellow flora and baffle trees that they would be consuming. Now, by the Ephorians, they were mostly used as plough animals, which meant that they had reduced horn sizes as they were used in less aggressive capacities. However, considering that they were used as pack animals, they were larger and far stronger than their original counterparts from Elasia. The Ephorians would also go to separating males and females in order to reduce competition and also isolate mating periods for when they'd need to. It was essentially population control, considering that the entire planet of Ifor is a jungle world. It would probably be a bad idea for one of these creatures to get out and start messing with the local ecosystem. Now, unfortunately, like many creatures from the planet Ifor, they were wiped out during the Yuuzhan Vong War when the Yuuzhan Vong deployed a deadly bioweapon on the planet. More on that in another video. So, the final subspecies of Reek would be the Kashyyyk Reek, or the Kashyykian Reek, as it is also known. Now, this was a very uncommon species of Reek, simply due to the fact that the ecosystem on the planet of Kashyyyk is dangerous, and it would see the death of many of the Reeks in the area. However, a couple of them did manage to survive and adapt to the hostile climate of the Shadowlands of Kashyyyk, as well as being able to fend off any of the predators. Now, this once again created a far larger version of the Reek than the original ones. It also meant that they had much narrower horns, but they also became longer, stronger, and would start to develop poison at the tips. Ah, Kashyyyk. The Wookiees were very much the best you could ever create that wasn't hostile. But it's no wonder they live in trees. And this brings us finally to the last example of a Reek. Though this isn't a subspecies, this is a Reek on the planet of Taris that has been infected with the Rakghoul Plague, which is quite worrying seeing as no traces of the virus are supposed to have survived Darth Malik's bombardment of the world. If you want to know a bit more about the Rakghoul Plague, I will pin a tile here for that video. Go check it out if you want to know a bit more about it. As you can clearly see, it has started to develop the greenish glow of the Rakghoul disease, and also the various skin tones and features of those infected with the plague. Though, up until this point, you'd thought that the Rakghoul Plague could only be infected into humanoids. Well, turns out the Reek as well. Poor thing. Now, there are other worlds that the Reek can be found on, and these are usually typically found in ranches. These are the Kondian Moon, Tatooine and Seleucam. These are usually either wild Reeks that have escaped the ranches and fled into the local wild area, or Reeks that are specifically being raised and bred by ranchers in order to sell them off-world or harvest them for their meat or their horns, depending on what they're doing. Now, notable exceptions where the Reeks have been involved in the main movies or in some expanded material is quite evidently the Battle of Geonosis with the arena where Anakin, Obi-Wan and Padme were going to be executed. A Reek was pitted against Anakin, which eventually met its fate by Jango Fett after it ran down Jango and disabled his jetpack. Another case is on Seleucam, where General Grievous had crash-landed on the planet and he would tame one of the wild Reeks in order to use as a war mount temporarily. Once he'd returned to his forces, I don't think we get any more information of the Reek. I might have to recheck that content out and see if there is an answer to what happened to that little Reek. One final point as well before I bring the episode to a close. If you actually look on the Wikipedia entry for the lore on the Reek, there is actually a bit of an error. In the sidebar on Wikipedia, there is an issue where it denotes the appearance of the Reek. It says mostly grey, not brown, whereas if you look through the main article of it, it is mostly brown. And so in my own head canon, I accept that the majority of them look mostly brown unless fed specific diets. And that is what I've been able to corroborate with the sources as well. So hopefully Wikipedia can fix that particular problem. But anyway, if you'd like to check out my sources down below, feel free to. And if you want to leave me a comment, maybe get a discussion going on any lore I could be missing, or anything you just want to generally chat about to do with the Reek. And if you like this video, maybe consider leaving me a like, maybe hitting the share button if you want to, spread the content about, get other people to get involved and just talk about it. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with all my content and notifications. That being said, take care, have a good day, and may the lore keepers ever be in your favour.